The best metaphor I ever heard of icons is like how you have pictures of your family and friends around your house. You're not worshiping the pictures. They're just your family. They're there as reminders. Hey guys, it's Lizzie. So in the past 2 months, I've gone to the Getty Museum in LA 2 times, so total maybe 7 hours looking at Christian art. Here are some of my favorite icons and artwork from the museum. It is such a spiritual, devotional type experience looking at everything, and this iconostan in particular, it makes me cry when I look at it. There's just so much beauty, emotion evoked. I'm also obsessed with going around to different churches, and after the service is over, walking around and spending so much time staring at all the artwork. If you follow my Snapchat, you know. I think that icons and statues are beautiful and they bring Christianity to life. And since I grew up Protestant, I never had this, so I'm binging now. I always thought that Catholics especially, I didn't know that much about the Orthodox Church, but I thought they were worshiping the statues and icons and believed they had some special power. It screamed pagan to me, and so I didn't like it. I thought churches should just have white walls and be super plain, no decorations. But my mindset changed last year when I read a lot on early Christianity, and mostly when I discovered that Orthodox and Catholic Christians do not worship the icons and statues. That is forbidden and considered sinful officially by their church councils and dogma. Their churches explicitly teach to not worship them. That's not their purpose. This is both a theology video, and I am going to get into some history and Bible verses, but it's also just my emotions and my experience with icons. Icons have really helped my relationship with God, and they've made my understanding of Christianity so much deeper. Humans are animals. A lot of times we forget this. We think we're only our minds, we're just intellectual, but we are also being constantly subliminally affected by things. And seeing the stories and the people of the Bible depicted in images is just really helpful for our faith. I'm going to get into all the theology and Bible verses in a few minutes. So before commenting, third commandment, no graven images, wait for my exegesis and then write out your comment attacking my argument. For myself, before worshiping in a church, which had icons in it, my relationship with God tended to be very individualistic, just me and God. And I had a very intellectual understanding over anything else. Less tangible, more stuck in this world of ideas. I've always prayed a lot, and my relationship with God does have really strong emotions. It's relational, but again, it's individualistic. People like Paul and David, who wrote large portions of the Bible, I've always felt an extreme connection with, but it was still just majority theology, philosophical proofs. Once we have enough history to prove the resurrection, I don't care about church history. I didn't care about the early church beyond Acts, and I don't know, even the people in the Bible, like the individual apostles and all the Christians in Acts, I didn't care that much. I wasn't very interested. It was just me and God, which makes sense because the United States and Western culture is extremely individualistic, and so of course that will taint our understanding of Christianity. But it is important to remember that Christianity started off in a non-Western culture as a collectivist religion. I've said for years that we need to be so careful to not get Christianity confused with our culture. And it's so interesting because back in the early church, when it was being heavily debated if icons are okay or not, at the Second Council of Nicaea, the main deciding point for why icons were allowed was for their culture to not taint the truths of Christianity. But allowing images of Christians and of Jesus was primarily to cut away this view that the material world, that matter, is bad, and to emphasize how Jesus was fully human and came to redeem every part of the material world. So, my love story with icons. Last spring, about a year ago, I started attending an Orthodox church by my house. And I was amazed because this was only my second time going into an Orthodox church. But immediately, I had this essence of feeling like I was in heaven. At the front of the church, there's the iconostand, which is doors of images and pictures, and they had the 12 apostles and Jesus and Mary holding Jesus as a baby and John the Baptist and Paul and Jesus on the cross. And on the sides of the church were these beautiful stained glass depicting the miracles of Jesus. And then all around the church as well, there were pictures of Christians through the years in the early church in the medieval ages who were super paramount in strengthening Christianity in leadership or theology. But especially with seeing Jesus, the apostles at the front of the church, it just felt like bringing the Bible to life and worshiping with all these images around me, like pictures of family. It helps me to believe and feel in this experiential way that I have never felt in a Protestant church. For a majority of 2017, I attended this Orthodox church twice a week. And I started having all these thoughts, realizing Jesus literally walked on the earth, hiked up mountains to go pray by himself. He ate food, and he was a baby and a child, and he grew up with Mary and Joseph, and he had friends and cousins and close relationships, and he cried and he sweat and he bled. He felt pain and sorrow, and on the cross he felt separated from God. Obviously, I read the gospel accounts and I know all of these things, but I think that there are different types of knowledge, and this goes back to what I said, where we are animals. When I can look at the front of the church, when I can look around me, above me, and see these paintings and statues. On the iconostand, when I can see Jesus' best friends, these amazing, courageous leaders who started the church, who died for the church. Seeing that they have eyes and noses and beards, these faces, hair, clothes. Again, it just feels more alive and real in this extreme, intense way. I'm so happy just thinking about this, because ever since I started attending churches that don't have a problem with pictures and depictions of Christians and Jesus, I felt so much closer to Jesus than I ever have in my life. I feel like it is real, physical, tangible. It's just the healthiest thing for my faith that I've ever found. It's kind of like how I'm in a long distance relationship with my boyfriend. And so on my phone lock screen, I have a picture of us, and I'm able to look at him and see him as a real person. And a lot of times we like to just talk on the phone because we talk for so long. And so whenever we FaceTime, that's so helpful for me to see him, to see his face as a real person. Even though we do have this emotional, intellectual connection, and I know all these things about him, just like how I know all these things about Jesus and all the people in the Bible, being able to see it depicted in an image, it's a whole other type of reality. Icons really helped in this subliminal way to change my faith and develop my theology. Like I said, in the past, I did not care about church history. Just seeing the icons of the apostles, John the Baptist, Mary, Jesus, and just around me, pictures of these Christians who I knew nothing about, who are called saints in the Orthodox and Catholic churches, I became so curious for how Christianity developed, how the story unfolded beyond just Acts, and how their theology continued to develop beyond the Bible. Because again, it brought Christianity to life. It just began to feel so alive, more real than I ever imagined it could feel. Christianity is intrinsically collectivist. It's about the community. It's the history of all the Christians that have come before you, who paved the way by dying for the faith, by writing out theology, by fighting off heresies, by debating each other in these councils to discern the purest truth about who God is. In Hebrews 12:1, it says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked before us." I have a vivid memory of reading this in my youth group class when I was a sophomore or a junior in high school. I just said that innately this means that all the Christians who have already died and are in heaven right now are watching from above and kind of like cheering us on, helping out our faith. And I remember our youth minister, whoever was teaching the class, got so kind of mad at me. Like everyone in the class kind of got mad at me, and they're like, absolutely not. That's not what it means. But it's obvious. And so when I said that in Orthodox church service and Catholicism as well, it feels like being in heaven, this verse, Hebrews 12:1, emulated through all the icons where everyone is surrounding us. They're in heaven right now. with God, and they want the absolute best for us. They want us to passionately live for God. And during Christmas time, Protestants have statues and pictures of Jesus and Mary and Joseph as well. Manger scenes and ornaments portraying Jesus and Mary and Joseph, the wise men, the shepherds. But it's only for that one time of year. And for me, and I think for so many people, because we're all animals, it's extremely helpful to have that throughout the entire year. To have these visual reminders that all of this is real. Again, because we are material beings. And in the early church, they fought so hard to allow icons and statues to stay a part of worship because it teaches that theology that Jesus was material, that he came to redeem the material world. Okay, so I want to get into some exegesis really quick. The third commandment of the 10 commandments, Exodus 20:3-5, condemns idols. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, which also can be translated as graven image, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. So I addressed this at the very beginning, but Orthodox and Catholic Christians are just not worshiping icons or statues. So I just took a break from filming because the battery died, and now the lighting changed and something in the room is like do. So I'm really sorry. It's not intentional at all. I think one of my lights is overheated or something. Okay, back to the video. So if it were the case that God did not want to have any images, statues as part of our relationship with him, as part of worship, then these other verses later in Exodus would not exist. Exodus 26:1, describing how to make the tabernacle curtains, quote, you shall make them with cherubim skillfully worked into them. So the curtain of one of the temple decorations is sewn, woven with an image of a heavenly creature. And then again in Exodus 25:22, God's instructions on how to decorate the Ark of the Covenant, quote, between the two cherubim that are on the Ark of the Covenant. And the most telling passage of the Old Testament is in Numbers 21, when God actually instructs Moses to build a bronze serpent, and when the people looked at that statue, they were healed. These are things that God is commanding. And I also want to get back to everyone's definition of worship. So yes, throughout church history, people have prayed to saints that have been depicted in images, and there have been miracles reported from bones of martyred Christians, from the clothing of the apostles in Acts. But it is very clear that just like this verse in Numbers, it is through the power of God. Icons always point back to God. The best metaphor I ever heard of icons is like how you have pictures of your family and friends around your house. You're not worshiping the pictures. They're just your family. They're there as reminders. Based upon that logic, that just because it's an image of a person, you're worshiping it, me having a picture of my boyfriend on my phone screen or of my best friend on my Instagram feed means I'm worshiping them. Or me asking my friends and family to pray for me, to intervene and pray on my behalf, that means I'm treating them as God. That means I don't believe Jesus is the only mediator. Thinking of the Christian community as a whole, even people who are already in heaven with God, as able to pray to God for us is just not idolatry. We are commanded to pray for each other and to ask others to pray for us. Ephesians 6:18, 1 Thessalonians 5:25, 1 Timothy 2:1-2, Luke 7:1-10, Matthew 15:21-28, Colossians 1:9-13. I could go on and on of all the Bible verses talking about us being mediators for each other and how we pray for each other. This goes back to what I discussed at the beginning, where Christianity is a communal religion, and icons and praying to people who are already in heaven with God, that's a part of it. It is intrinsically mediational. We're together, we're helping each other become closer to God. The way I grew up, where I just thought of it as me and God and that's it, is missing this huge part of Christianity, which is the community. And like with the great cloud of witnesses, a lot of our community has come before us and is in heaven right now with God, and remembering them and venerating them is part of our faith. I'll end up making a whole video about this, but I want to talk about venerating real quick because a lot of people mistake it for worship. Showing honor and gratitude to someone is not worshiping them. I'm someone who writes really intense affirmation thank you letters to people. I'll go on for so long. And just because I'm focusing on the positive aspects of a person, affirming them, telling them how much God has used them to help me, I'm not worshiping the person. And so I think that our culture is not at all about honor. A lot of non-Western cultures, like Asian culture, is really into respect. Even Spanish has a whole verb tense that's meant to show respect to people. And so many cultures are into respect and honoring people, and that's not part of American culture. So that's why it feels so foreign to show honor to someone. But being inspired by someone and how they've helped your walk with Christ and help you grow closer to God, acknowledging that, telling them that, it's not worship. There's a lot of debate on how early icons were. Eusebius describes a bronze statue of Jesus reaching out to the woman who he cured. It's the story in Luke 8:43-48. This woman had been bleeding for years and gone to so many different doctors. No one had been able to heal her, and then she touches Jesus' cloak and she's immediately healed. So Eusebius described this statue of Jesus and the woman that he is implying dates back to the really early church, like in the 1st century. Quotes, "A bronze statue of a woman resting on one knee with arms outstretched. Facing this was another of the same material, an upright figure of a man with a double cloak draped neatly over his shoulders and his hand outstretched out to the woman. This statue, which was said to resemble the features of Jesus, was still there in my own time, so that I saw it with my own eyes." And another example in the early church, in the 2nd century, Irenaeus in Against Heresies condemns the way the Gnostics are treating an icon or using an icon, but I think it's so interesting that in his passage, he doesn't completely condemn icons altogether. It's just specific to this one situation, this one heretic group. A lot of times, what is not said, what is left out, can prove a lot. The fact that he wasn't going off against graven images, icons in general, that would have been the perfect opportunity to do that, but instead he's just addressing this one specific misuse of Christian art. The Orthodox tradition sees the first icon in Genesis 1:26 and 27, when God creates man in his own image. It's a really beautiful concept. So they think of it as everyone is an icon. And the way sin works, sin comes in and puts dirt or dust, covers up that image of the icon, which is ultimately reflecting God. Sin is just when we cannot see the icon clearly. While icons had been used in the early church throughout Christianity, in the 8th century, there was this huge debate about it, and there was an entire group of people called iconoclasts or icon smashers who literally went around smashing and destroying icons. And then the other side were the iconodules, venerators of icons, who had no issues with icons being part of worship. This was fully debated, addressed in the 7th Ecumenical Council of Christianity, or the Second Council of Nicaea, which was in AD 787, so pretty late, but that is when they officially declared that icons are allowed to be used in worship. I'm super glad the council went the way it did, and with all of the early church councils, I think obviously God was working through the people there, and the decisions of the councils are what God wanted, because they established so much core theology in Christianity. This was more theological than anything else. Like I briefly touched upon at the beginning, it was seen as protecting the fully man aspect of Jesus. So a lot of the Marian dogmas in Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity are meant to protect the fully divine aspect of Jesus' nature. Being able to have icons and statues are just physical reminders that Jesus came to redeem matter, the material world, that God's spirit can dwell in the material. And it's so interesting to me that in cultures that became primarily Protestant, they're now becoming majority atheist, agnostic. We are animals, and I think having icons and statues as a part of worship actually helps people to believe in God. I think a mistake our culture made was to make Christianity only intellectual, to forget about all of the senses. I think we're really naive when we think that we're just intellectual and rational creatures. We're animals, and so many things affect our belief systems, and I think that having icons, statues in a church service to remind us that Jesus came down and was fully man That's just this emotional reminder that together with our intellect and these historical proofs of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus help us to maintain our faith. A lot of my theology has changed over the past year, so a lot of people have messaged me and just been really confused because they've seen past videos contradicting newer videos. I don't necessarily announce everything I change my mind on just because it's very personal to me, a lot of the things that have been happening in my mind. But recently I've begun to believe in the assumption of Mary, which means that like Enoch, she was brought up into heaven. And I believe this because it is historically attested to in the early church. But emotionally, it's something that was extremely difficult for me to change my mind on just because this is a huge dogma in the Catholic Church and I was taught to hate the Catholic Church growing up. So anything the Catholic Church believes is something I want to hate and not believe. Does that make sense? I feel like it's so easy for us to be emotionally influenced by the way we grew up. But emotionally being able to accept what there seemed to be a lot of evidence for was so much easier for me to accept and get over this emotional block because of an icon in the Orthodox church I attended of the Assumption of Mary. It was at the very front of the church with the Assumption of Mary. And I'm not saying I believed in it because I saw a picture of it. Obviously not, but all I'm saying is that humans are physical creatures and we are animals. And there's more to us than just this pure intellectualism, and I believe that needs to be reflected in our worship practices. When we see Jesus on the cross, when we say the creed together and declare our faith, when we have incense that mimics what is currently going on in heaven, this emulation of worship of a king, when we kneel in prayer in this gesture of humility, all of these are physical manifestations that affect all of our senses, and they help us to have a healthy faith. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!